Chapter 326 Blood Spirit Drill. Han Li didn't look at the Emperor of Yue's resentful gaze. Instead, he looked at the darkened bloody light that remained on his body. A golden ruler, a pair of jagged purple blades, and a blue longsword floated within the bloody light. They were the magic tools of Song Meng and company. At this moment, they were motionless within the bloody light. It seemed they had completely lost their spirit. Han Li's eyes flashed with thoughtfulness. It seemed the devilish light protecting the Emperor of Yue's body was capable of corrupting common magic tools. The only item Han Li currently had on hand that could resist this evil technique was the Black Dragon's grasps. Until now, the only person to appear from the cloud of debris was the Emperor of Yue. It appeared as though the blue-robed man, who had claimed to be the Black Fiend schoolmaster, had truly died from the heavenly lightning seed. With that thought, even though Han Li's heart relaxed, he had no intention of giving the enemy an opportunity to catch his breath. Han Li immediately issued a mental order to his puppets to start their attack, launching an unending barrage of light beams and arrows toward the enemy. Now fearful of losing even more of their magic tools, the group of Yellow Maple Valley cultivators chanted incantations and formed hand seals instead, continuously throwing down magic techniques and talismans alongside Han Li's attack. They all understood that the only way to free themselves from this nightmare would be to strike with all their might. Otherwise, even more of them would suffer tragic ends. When the Emperor of Yue saw this, he expressionlessly swept his arm in front of him. A huge shield of blood-red light appeared, easily blocking the oncoming attacks. However, the bloody light emitted from his body was becoming increasingly weaker and gave the impression that it might fail at any time. This caused Han Li and company to attack with even more fury. The Emperor of Yue coldly snorted as he wordlessly took out a small dark green bottle from his bosom. He nimbly tossed out a scarlet, long-incised pill from the bottle that reeked of blood. It didn't appear to be any sort of good medicine, but he still threw it into his mouth without the slightest hesitation and threw the bottle away. It actually only held a single medicine pill. Once the scarlet pill reached the Emperor of Yue's stomach, Han Li witnessed a shocking scene. The Emperor of Yue's expression shook and his bloody light became brilliant once more. In addition, his wounds were healing at a speed visible to the eye. In that short moment, Han Li watched as the enemy recovered all of his magic power and healed all of the wounds he received from the heavenly lightning seed. Damn it! How could such a thing happen? When Song Meng saw this, he muttered in disbelief, forgetting to throw out his tens of already prepared ice spikes. Han Li also couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't know what pill the opponent took, but it had heaven-defying effects. He had read all sorts of ancient books, but none of them had mentioned something like this. He used a cultivation essence pill. A life-saving medicine pill that can only be refined after cultivating several particular devilish arts and by harming one's own cultivation. This pill can only be used by its creator, as it is fatal for anyone else who takes it. A clear, cold voice came from Chen Qiaoqian's side, leaving Han Li stunned. Even Chen Qiaoqian turned around with a face full of surprise. "Senior Marshal Sister Zhang, you're alright." "I'm fine. However, the demon that killed Senior Marshal Brother Lu is before my eyes and I must kill him." Zhang Weiniang had finally come to her senses. She smiled with great difficulty at Chen Qiaoqian, before saying this with a cold expression. "We all wish to kill him. But the problem is that he wishes to do the same to us." Han Li indifferently replied without turning his head. Zhang Weiniang turned and looked below in surprise. What she saw suddenly caused her expression to become unsightly. As they were talking, the Emperor of Yue, who was below them, withdrew his shield of light. The bloody light that surrounded his body surged and expanded until it was about 10 meters thick. The magic tools that were trapped within the bloody light had then started to gradually melt away. The radiance protecting his body was now several times larger and his cultivation was far greater than it was previously. As such, the bloody light on his body was now able to easily resist the assault of magic techniques and puppet attacks. The Emperor of Yue raised his head to stare solely at Han Li with ice-cold eyes. He abruptly reached his hand out from behind him and grabbed at the air. A fire-red bead then suddenly flew out from somewhere and accurately dropped into his hand. Seeing this, Han Li's eyes flashed with surprise as he thought of the blue-robed man that had died from his heavenly lightning seed. It seems that this bead was from his remains, and now the 5 elements blood cores could be considered complete. So long as Han Li could kill this fiend, he would be able to acquire this treasure that would greatly benefit his core formation. Boy, do you have any more heavenly lightning seeds? If you have them, then I'll stand right here and receive them. I want to see whether your heavenly lightning seeds or my protective devilish art is greater. The Emperor of Yue carefully put the bead away and said this to Han Li in a cold voice. Once those words left his mouth, the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators were startled and couldn't help but look at Han Li. Han Li's expression didn't change, but he inwardly snorted. He calmly replied, "This one is also quite curious whether you are the Black Fiend School sect master, or if that other person was. Furthermore, it appears from the current circumstances that your esteemed self had previously absorbed over half of his cultivation before you were interrupted. I am quite puzzled, as there are rarely such people willing to act as a sacrifice in this world." Han Li didn't answer his question but asked a question in return. He returned derision with derision. When the Emperor of Yue heard this, he revealed a strange expression that resembled both regret and mockery. But soon after, for some unknown reason, his face appeared increasingly menacing as his eyebrows became downward slanted. Han Li's heart trembled and he opened his mouth slightly, quietly sending the 4 remaining Yellow Maple Valley cultivators a sound transmission that left them shocked. Having finished that, Han Li then indifferently said, "Whether or not you believe my words is up to you." Han Li didn't use sound transmission for that last sentence, allowing the Emperor of Yue to clearly hear him. The Emperor's face grew cold, and he suddenly pointed a finger at Han Li, shooting a beam of red light as thick as a thumb toward him in an instant. Although the red beam of light was astonishingly quick, Han Li was still barely able to cause both his white scale shield and tortoise shell to superimpose in front of him. Soon after, a barrier of blue light covered his body. Han Li didn't dare to be careless against this unknown attack. Poo-poo. When Han Li heard this, he unconsciously leaned to his side, before feeling heat in his right shoulder, followed by acute pain. After seeing a bleeding, finger-sized hole in his shoulder, Han Li's face became unsightly. He licked his dry lips and turned his gaze toward his 2 magic tools with disbelief. A similar, small hole appeared on the superimposed white scale shield and the tortoise shell. The red light had penetrated both of them without resistance. As for the azure essence sword shield on his body, it didn't have the slightest of effect. Upon contact with the attack, it completely dissolved without a trace. What Han Li saw caused his heart to drop. If his body wasn't nimble from his long practice with the shifting smoke steps, then his heart would have been struck and he would have died immediately. A single moment of carelessness like this could cause anyone to lose their life. The more Han Li thought of this, the greater the fear he felt. Although he knew that the Emperor of Yue had absorbed a majority of the blue-robed man's magic power, the Emperor's drastic increase in strength was far beyond his expectations. However, Han Li didn't know that as he was stricken by fear from his near-death experience, the Emperor of Yue was even more amazed that Han Li had survived his strike. Although it appeared that his last move appeared effortless to use, this blood spirit drill was actually a single-use move. Only after compressing one's true essence by several tens of times would one be able to unleash this surprise killing move. This was one of the devilish arts killing moves that he cultivated. Not only was the preparation for this unbearably painful, it also required far too much time. When the Emperor had previously used this technique, not a single cultivator had managed to survive it. But now, Han Li was merely lightly injured from it. How could he not be shocked? Only one blood spirit drill remained within his body. He hesitated, unsure whether or not to use it on Han Li once more. When the Yellow Maple Valley cultivators saw that Han Li was injured from the recent attack, their expressions vastly changed. Unconsciously, Han Li had already become their pillar of support. For him to be injured so unexpectedly greatly alarmed them. Go. Han Li spit this out without the slightest hesitation after he shifted his gaze away from his wound. He madly poured magic power into his divine wind boat and swiftly flew off to the side. When Song Ming and the others heard this, they gave each other a mutual glance before following Han Li's orders to flee. When the Emperor of Yue saw this, he was initially surprised, but then sneered soon after. He flashed forward into the air, wanting to chase after Han Li. However, he now saw that over 10 uniquely shaped puppets had surrounded him.